What if the history we've learned, the foundational stories of our civilizations, maybe even the origins of our beliefs, were not quite what they seem?
Hmm.
What if there was, like, a hidden hand, meticulously crafting the narrative of time itself?
It's a powerful thought.
It really is. And that's the truly provocative question at the heart of our deep dive today. We're unpacking a really audacious premise from the book Encrypted Reality.
It's certainly audacious, yeah. The core thesis is that history, as we generally understand it, is actually an intricately engineered narrative.
Engineered, wow.
Yeah, the book posits that a secret society, which it calls the Watch, has been meticulously shaping this reality pretty much since ancient times.
Okay, the Watch. And where did they supposedly come from?
Well, their origins are traced back to ancient Canaan, and the driving force is described as this subconscious, deeply ingrained impulse the author calls the legacy reflex.
Legacy reflex.
And it's directly tied, the book argues, to a specific lineage with Neanderthal ancestry. It's a proposition that, it challenges basically everything we think we know about our past.
Okay, our mission today, then, is to really go deep into the sources you've shared with us, to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights, and really explore this audacious claim.
Right.
We're taking you on a journey through ancient empires, pivotal historical moments, and some really surprising connections. We'll try to reveal how the Watch allegedly manipulated, well, everything, from global finance to the very origins of organized religion.
Yeah, creating what the source calls an omnimyth.
An omnimyth to control populations.
That's the idea presented, yeah.
Yeah.
And the alleged scope of this manipulation is just vast. We'll be looking at how seemingly disconnected events.
Like what?
Well, from the reigns of ancient Mesopotamian rulers, Sargon of Akkad, figures like that,
Very.
to the work of Renaissance polymaths, people like Alberti, and even things like the very first documented principles of double-entry bookkeeping.
Really? Even accounting?
Even accounting. And the true story, supposedly behind the Mongol Empire, it suggests all these might just be threads in a much, much larger, deliberately woven tapestry.
Wow.
It definitely challenges us to reconsider how much we truly know about our own history.
Okay, so let's start at the very, very beginning then, with this really surprising claim. The Watch's origins are tied to a unique genetic influence driven by this legacy reflex,
Yeah.
Neanderthals.
Yeah.
How do ancient hominids factor into a secret society manipulating history? And what is this legacy reflex exactly?
It's absolutely central to the whole theory. The legacy reflex is described as this unconscious, almost primal impulse to preserve one's lineage across the ages.
Yeah.
The book suggests that individuals who have greater Neanderthal admixture might possess a stronger sort of inherent need for survival and control.
The stronger need.
Yeah, driven by this deep-seated, often unconscious desire to assert their lineage against historical displacement by Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
The author even puts forward the idea that political conservatism, for instance, could be seen as a subconscious effort to, conserve humanity's archaic past.
Like clinging to a primal blueprint in our DNA.
That's the idea. The core insight here isn't just political or social. It's presented as a fundamental biological imperative for a specific lineage.
That's a really profound thought. A behavioral drive rooted in ancient genetics. So what else does the source say about Neanderthal capabilities? Because, the conventional view used to be they were less sophisticated than us.
Right, and that's what's fascinating here. The source really highlights how modern scholarship is increasingly attributing significant behavioral modernity to Neanderthals before Homo sapiens even arrived in some areas.
Modernity-like.
We're talking about capabilities that really defy those older assumptions. Symbolic thought, potentially complex language, ritual burials, really advanced tools.
Advanced tools.
Yeah, evidence points to their use of pigments, maybe for decoration or body paint, crafted jewelry, and sophisticated tools made using adhesives. They even seem to have engaged in long-distance trade.
Trade networks, so complex social structures.
Exactly. It indicates complex social networks. Discoveries in Iberia, for example, show Neanderthal cave art that predates Homo sapiens in Europe. And they were wearing clothes long before Homo sapiens.
So a much more capable picture than the old stereotype.
Far from the brutish image sometimes portrayed. Highly capable, intelligent hominids.
Okay, so if Neanderthals were that capable, how did their traits, their genetic influence, actually pass on to modern humans? How did it become part of this legacy reflex?
The theory points squarely at interbreeding as the mechanism.
Right, we know that happens.
Exactly. Specifically, the source mentions interbreeding events, like potentially in Khabara Cave in Israel, which are believed to have contributed to what's known as the Levantine Aurignacian expansion. This marks the origin of anatomically modern humans outside Africa around, say, 48,000 years ago.
And the key takeaway.
The crucial takeaway, according to the source, is that all non-African Homo sapiens today carry some Neanderthal DNA from this ancient interbreeding. It's not just a footnote.
It's part of us.
It's a fundamental part of our shared human makeup, linking us directly to these ancient populations. And this genetic legacy, the source claims, might manifest in observable physical traits and maybe even influence behavior.
Like what physical traits?
Well, for instance, beards are presented as an ancient hominid trait, possibly influenced by Neanderthal genetics, offering warmth in colder climates.
Okay, unlike early Homo sapiens who were less hairy.
Right, a stark contrast. The unique blend of genetics and the environmental pressures these early Neanderthal Homo sapiens hybrids experienced, particularly in colder climates, is suggested to have fostered an early development of introspection and strategic thinking.
Strategic thinking.
Exactly. This, the source claims, enabled them to become the hidden architects of civilization.
Hidden architect.
A legacy subtly symbolized, the book argues, by the recurring image of bearded progenitors throughout historical narratives. The insight it's trying to convey is how environment and genetics might have converged to create a specific kind of strategic intelligence.
Okay, this leads us to a pretty sensitive claim the source makes about societal inequality potentially stemming from these ancient genetic differences. How does it lay that out?
It is a complex and sensitive point, absolutely. And it's really crucial to stress this is how the source material presents it. We're not endorsing it.
Understood.
The book claims that modern-day societal inequality might even stem from Neanderthals having slightly larger brains, on average, than modern Homo sapiens. And it points to a correlation between brain size and intelligence in closely related groups. The source notes there are still observable average differences in several physical traits in populations with higher Neanderthal admixture. It specifically mentions that East Asians carry more Neanderthal DNA than Europeans, while Oceanian populations have the highest percentages of Denisovan ancestry. Then, the source brings up historical leaders with the highest death tolls, pointing out that Mao Zedong, Genghis Khan, and Hong Jikwan were Asian.
Okay.
And it contrasts this with the fact that Asian populations today consistently have the lowest violent crime rates globally.
That's quite a contrast.
It is. And the source itself acknowledges the profound complexity and sensitivity of this topic. It states it demands really careful consideration of historical context, statistical nuances, socio-political factors, and suggests it probably deserves its own dedicated analysis, maybe even an entire book. The core idea the source seems to be trying to convey is a link between ancient genetic predispositions and complex societal outcomes, which it frames as potentially engineered outcomes.
So what does this all mean for us, this idea of a Jungian shadow formed by these archaic admixtures, and this notion of reconciling with our inherent nature? How does that connect to this unyielding claim against removal?
Right. According to the source, every individual carries this Jungian shadow influenced by these archaic admixtures, this deep, often unconscious part of our psyche shaped by ancient genetic inheritances.
Okay.
The ultimate goal within this particular framework is supposedly to reconcile with our inherent nature, to understand and integrate these deep-seated influences.
And the unyielding claim.
The unyielding claim against removal is presented as this subconscious force driving certain human behaviors, a primal drive for the survival and, frankly, dominance of one's lineage.
Dominance.
Yeah. The raw power and aggression sometimes associated with Neanderthals, inherited through this archaic DNA, is suggested to potentially manifest as things like serial violence or political brutality throughout history.
So our deep past isn't just history.
Exactly. The insight is that it actively shapes our present behaviors and societal structures in ways we might not consciously perceive at all.
Okay, so we've established this deep genetic blueprint for the watch's legacy reflex. But how did this primal impulse actually translate into forming a real, tangible, covert organization in ancient times? How did these early architects start putting their plan into action in, the real world?
This is where the concept of the first wave of agents comes into play. The source describes it as a deliberate, recurring pattern of influence.
Not the biological first wave out of Africa.
No, distinct from that. It references the Kapsa school fossils found in Israel, dated around 125,000 years ago, some of the earliest Homo sapiens out of Africa. These early humans lived in Canaan alongside Neanderthals, and the source suggests they underwent a kind of self-domestication, becoming less aggressive, more cooperative.
Coexisting.
Right. This coexistence, especially in places like Israel, suggests a unique historical moment where these genetic lines intermingled. While getting into Europe was tough during severe glacial periods.
Around 100,000 years ago.
Yeah, roughly. But warmer climates, maybe 120,000 years ago, made entry possible, setting the stage for these interactions. The book then introduces a figure called G, described as a 15th century operative. He's presented as a crucial example of this cyclical pattern, like a fractal echo of earlier agents.
A fractal echo. What does that mean? And who was G?
Well, the theory posits that G actually lived simultaneously as multiple historical figures.
Simultaneously.
Yes, the Italian polymath Leon Battista Alberti.
The Renaissance man.
That's him. And also supposedly the Aztec founder Nezahualcóyotl.
In Mexico.
Yes, and the Inca architect Pachacuti.
In Peru at the same time.
That's the claim. The key insight from G's alleged multiple identities is how the watch supposedly implemented its influence. It wasn't just shaping events from behind the scenes.
But actually being those key figures.
Exactly. Embodying pivotal figures across continents, simultaneously steering diverse civilizations from within. It speaks to an absolutely unprecedented level of coordinated historical remixing, if true.
And the source suggests this pattern goes back even further. You mentioned Sargon of Akkad, the Hyksos king of Apophis, so a continuous line stretching back millennia.
Precisely. The theory claims that after being expelled from Egypt, an ancient branch of the watch dispersed globally.
Expelled from Egypt.
Right. And this dispersal wasn't random. They allegedly played a role in seeding the Shang dynasty in China, influencing Vedic culture in India, and establishing the powerful Phoenician Empire in the Mediterranean.
So ancient empires weren't distinct.
The core idea here is that successive ancient empires were not distinct entities, but rather different phases of the same covert network's operations. Greco-Roman civilization, for example, is presented not as a break, but as a direct successor to the Phoenician and Canaanite network's influence.
Extending the lineage.
Exactly, demonstrating the watch's supposed long-term planning.
Okay, so they've set up these initial empires. How did the watch adapt their strategy after something monumental like Alexander the Great's conquests? That must have shaken things up.
It seems it did. After Alexander's conquests, the watch allegedly established a new strategic hub in Central Asia with the Kushan Empire.
The Kushan Empire, Central Asia. Why there?
Well, it was critical for two main reasons, according to the source. First, it controlled the vital Silk Road trade routes.
Huge economic leverage.
Absolutely. And second, it became a strategic point for disseminating what the book calls engineered belief systems.
Engineered beliefs, like religions.
Things like Buddhism and Mithraism, yeah. The Kushans are presented as instrumental in creating a kind of universal omnimyth, a foundational religious template.
Okay, what's the template?
It's centered on a dying and rising god archetype. The insight is that this template, the source claims, was then replicated across numerous world religions.
Why?
To ensure ideological control, essentially. To unify disparate populations under a managed spiritual framework. It's about designing a core narrative adaptable enough to be reused for different cultures and different eras.
Moving into Eurasia now. The source presents a truly radical reinterpretation of historical power dynamics, focusing on the Khazar Empire. What's this really bold claim?
It's really astonishing. It fundamentally reshapes our understanding of Eurasian conquest. The theory posits that the powerful Khazar Empire was the true progenitor of both the Kievan Ruses and the Mongol Empire.
Wait, the Khazars were the progenitors of the Mongols?
That's the claim. This reframes the entire narrative. The Mongol conquests, according to Encrypted Reality, weren't a new invasion from distant Mongolia, but rather a strategic rebranding of this pre-existing Khazar Turkic superstate.
A rebranding.
Effectively, yes.
Oh.
Continuing the watch's dominion under a new, arguably more terrifying name, the Khazar Khaganate, which existed roughly 650 to 970 AD, is described as this powerful, polyethnic Turkic empire.
Right, controlling that corridor between the Caucasus and the Caspian.
Exactly, shaping the political, military, and commercial norms of the steppe for centuries. The theory argues that many Turkic tribes who later became integral to the Mongol military machine were actually vassals, allies, or direct descendants of the Khazars.
So this implies figures we think of as Mongol leaders were
Yeah,
something else entirely in this theory.
precisely. Figures traditionally portrayed as distinct Mongol warlords, Genghis Khan, Batu Khan, are reinterpreted. They're seen as cryptic representations or maybe even recycled names of later Russian or Ottoman leaders.
Cycled names.
Yeah, the source highlights that the titles Khan and Tsar were often interchangeable in early Russian history.
Blurring the lines.
Exactly. It supports the idea of a hybrid, nomadic imperial context. The insight here is that major historical figures might be archetypes, not unique individuals, used to reinforce a fabricated narrative. And there's a spiritual link, too.
Ah.
Both the Khazars and the early Mongols practiced Tengrism, venerating Tengri, the eternal blue sky. This practice, shaped by earlier shamanic traditions, forms a spiritual bridge, possibly via Scythian religion.
Providing a unified underpinning.
Right, a cosmotheocratic worldview, fusing ecology, governance, warfare, that the source claims covertly shaped several empires.
That's quite a challenge to the mainstream view. What actual evidence does the source present to support such a disruptive claim about the Mongols? That sounds, well, hard to believe.
It is a major claim, and the source offers several arguments to cast doubt on the conventional Mongol narrative. First, and this is pretty striking, is the glaring absence of verifiable Mongol documents, inscriptions, or artifacts from the 13th century.
Genghis Khan's supposed era.
Exactly. There are apparently no physical structures, no tools, no culturally attributable items that directly link back to that period.
What else?
Second, the logistical implausibility. The sheer operational scale of the Mongol military campaigns is questioned. Conquering such vast lands in what seem like impossibly short time frames,
Defies medieval logistics.
it seems to defy the known constraints of medieval logistics, climate, communication networks.
Okay, third point.
Third, the theory casts doubt on Mongolia itself ever having been the true seat of imperial power.
So where was it?
It identifies southern Russia, specifically the Volga and Don regions, the Khazar heartland, as the likely epicenter of this power.
The Khazar heartland. Interesting. And the fourth point.
The fourth, and this is crucial, is linguistic evidence. The vertical Mongolian script, it argues, traces its roots back not to remote Mongolia,
But where?
but to ancient Middle Eastern languages, ultimately to Aramaic, via Old Uyghur and Sogdian scripts.
Aramaic. What's the implication?
The implication is profound. Mongolian literacy, and thus potentially its cultural and administrative origins, might not have emerged in isolation in Mongolia.
But in those commercial hubs.
Exactly. In the multilingual commercial hubs shaped by the Khazars and their trade networks, it suggests the written culture, maybe even the administrative origins of the Mongol Empire, were deeply intertwined with the older, established systems.
Okay, if the conventional narrative of Genghis Khan is being challenged so fundamentally, who does this theory propose he actually was?
Well, the theory proposes that Genghis Khan, born Temujin, isn't a distinct historical figure as we usually understand him. He's seen more as a cryptic representation.
An archetype.
Something like that. And his brother, Khazar, sometimes spelled Khazar.
Khazar, like Khazar or Caesar. Tsar.
Exactly, the linguistic echoes are pointed out. Khazar is presented as an archetype of the Scythian archer. This links the narrative back through ancient cultures like Afnasyevo and Andronovo, ultimately connecting to the Turkic Scythian Khaganates.
Suggesting continuity, not a sudden emergence.
Right. The insight is how historical figures are presented as recurring patterns, archetypes reinforcing a continuous hidden narrative, not unique individuals popping up. And when it comes to what Genghis Khan actually looked like, well, the source points out that while we don't have definitive physical remains...
Right, his tomb's never been found.
Exactly. But secondhand descriptions and genetic evidence from ancient steppe peoples offer what the source calls a nuanced counter-narrative.
Okay, what's the nuance?
They suggest Genghis was likely phenotypically Northeast Asian, but his cultural background was essentially Khazar. And remember, the Mongol Empire expanded across Eurasia, absorbing numerous groups.
Including Indo-European groups.
Yeah, like Scythians and Tocharians. These peoples often had lighter features, red or blonde hair, light skin, which they passed on through intermarriage.
So the Mongol elite might have looked quite mixed.
Very likely. Many of the elite, including Khan's descendants and generals, probably had a mix of East Asian and Central Asian features. Some historical accounts even describe them with ruddy or reddish complexions. This genetic and cultural blending challenges those oversimplified historical descriptions.
And how did this alleged rebranding of history continue to affect a major power like Russia, particularly with the rise of the Romanov dynasty?
Right. The source posits that after the time of troubles, that chaotic period from 1598 to 1613, the Romanov dynasty systematically rewrote Russian history. They actively worked to eliminate Khazar influence, purged military aristocracies with Khazar ties, and ordered the destruction or, well, the rewriting of ancient chronicles.
A deliberate erasure.
That's the claim. A key moment highlighted is Peter the Great's 1722 decree. It demanded that all religious institutions submit their historical texts to Moscow.
Centralizing control over history.
Precisely. This centralized effort allegedly led to the revision or outright erasure of countless records, and the source argues this wasn't accidental.
Guided by whom?
Under the guidance, supposedly, of German historians and Western advisors, the Romanovs allegedly rewrote Russian and global history to hide the fact that the Khazars, rebranded as Mongol, were originally a Karaite Russian superstate that spanned centuries. The insight is how historical narratives can be deliberately constructed by ruling powers to solidify legitimacy and erase inconvenient truths. And supporting this theory, the source points to the Crimean Karaites.
Who are they?
They are genetically confirmed descendants of the Khazars, and they played important roles in mainstream Russian history, particularly in espionage and diplomacy.
Why them?
Because of their multilingual abilities, fluent in Turkic, Hebrew, Russian, plus their political neutrality and reputation for loyalty and literacy. They were crucial translators, informants, intermediaries.
Useful for dealing with Ottomans, Tatars.
Exactly. Their cultural adaptability and distance from mainstream Jewish institutions made them trusted agents, particularly, the source notes, in Catherine the Great's bureaucracy. And what's fascinating is the claim that actual Khazar records are minimal. They apparently used Hebrew script bureaucratically, but spoke a Turkic dialect. The Kram language itself is suggested to have been engineered as a cryptographic medium.
A code language?
Yeah, encoding a blend of Slavic, Hebrew, and Turkic elements. The source even links this to the mysterious Voynich manuscript.
The undeciphered book.
Right. It says the Voynich shows textual similarities to Karaim grammar and Mandarin patterns, implying the existence of a highly complex polyglot cipher network, a hidden language of the watch.
Language as a tool for covert control.
Exactly. That's the insight.
The impact of this Khazar influence network, if it existed as described, would be immense. Does the source connect it to huge historical events, like, say, the Black Death?
Absolutely. It directly connects the Black Death to this overarching narrative.
No.
Well, the plague originated in Central Asia, likely modern-day Kyrgyzstan or Mongolia. It spread westward via trade routes, especially the Silk Road.
Right.
It eventually reached the Crimean Peninsula, a key hub in the Genoese trade network. By the 1340s, the Islamicized Golden Horde, which was entrenched in the Black Sea region, reportedly hurled plague-infected corpses over the walls of the besieged Genoese city of Kaffa.
The biological warfare story?
Whether that's literal or apocryphal, that narrative marks the starting point for one of history's deadliest pandemics. Genoese traders are then said to have carried the Black Death west to Italy.
Setting off the chain reaction.
Exactly, a biological chain reaction that ultimately claimed, by some estimates, up to 475 million lives globally. The demographic aftermath was just catastrophic. Europe lost perhaps a third of its people. The Americas mysteriously suffered significant depopulation before mass European contact, which the source implies might be linked. And the source argues that when the Ottomans closed overland trade routes by capturing Constantinople in 1453, European powers, supposedly guided by unseen geopolitical actors and catalyzed by the demographic and economic chaos of the plague, were essentially forced to turn to maritime expansion.
Ushering in the Age of Discovery.
Precisely. The insight here is that the Black Death is presented not merely as a tragic natural disaster, but as a pivotal, potentially orchestrated event that profoundly redirected global geopolitical power and set the stage for subsequent eras of control.
Okay, let's pivot to that pivotal moment, the fall of Constantinople in 1453. It's often seen as an ending, the end of Byzantium. But the source you shared portrays it very differently, as a carefully orchestrated beginning for the Italian Renaissance. How does it make that connection?
Exactly. The theory flips the script. It proposes that the fall of Constantinople wasn't an end, but the catalytic event that deliberately jump-started the Italian Renaissance.
Oh.
As the Ottoman Empire took control, successive waves of Byzantine Greek refugees, scholars, scribes, intellectuals fled. They sought refuge primarily in Venice and, most importantly, Florence.
Bringing knowledge with them.
An invaluable treasure trove. Hellenic manuscripts, mastery of classical philosophy, especially Plato, scientific lore, fluency in Greek. This intellectual infusion provided the crucial fuel for the Renaissance. But here's the twist, the watch's alleged design in this process.
Okay.
The source claims that these Byzantine manuscripts were deliberately funneled to Florence. This apparent loss of Constantinople conveniently seeded the next cultural age.
While allowing the watch to do what?
To promote newly manufactured narratives as ancient wisdom. After 1453, the rediscovery of Gothic scientific texts and advanced mathematics supposedly accelerated in Florence.
And the printing press.
Crucially, the newly invented printing press enabled G's grand historical remixes to circulate widely, but under the deceptive guise of genuine antiquities.
So the catastrophe was an opportunity.
The core insight is how the Roch allegedly used a perceived cultural catastrophe as an opportunity to introduce and legitimize its own curated narratives, leveraging new technologies like printing.
So the watch wasn't just observing history unfold, but actively curating what information survived and thrived.
Yeah.
Almost like customs officers at the border of time.
That's a perfect analogy. The watch, according to this theory, acted precisely like customs officers at a border, deciding which ideas cross into the future, which get confiscated, rewritten, or just destroyed.
And the printing press was there.
Their passport control booth, yeah. Stamping only approved narratives for passage, ensuring that contradictory evidence from the pre-Renaissance era was systematically erased or sidelined.
So much pre-Renaissance documentation might be spurious.
That's what the source suggests, and that technologies like printing, gunpowder, the compass allegedly enabled G's grand historical remix. Despite Constantinople's formidable defenses, its fall signaled the watch's strategic advancement. Counterfeiters, drawn from every learned profession, then transported extensive knowledge supposedly preserved before the Black Death into Florence. This control also extended, the theory claims, to deliberate linguistic uniformity. By the 7th century, Arabic had largely supplanted Greek as the scholarly lingua franca. Its script became a template for Persian, Turkish, and even influenced cursive forms of Greek, Slavic tongues, Latin.
Why would they do that?
It's presented as evidence of a deliberate linguistic imposition by the watch to control and standardize communication across vast regions, making it easier to manage and alter information flows.
But hang on. Islamic scholars are widely credited with preserving ancient Greek knowledge during Europe's so-called Dark Ages.
Yeah.
How does this theory account for their crucial role?
Yes, the source absolutely acknowledges that vital role. Many classical texts, scientific advancements were preserved and significantly enhanced by Islamic scholars during Europe's Dark Ages.
Transmitting knowledge back to Europe.
Exactly. Their contributions were essential. The source mentions a key figure, the Muslim polymath Yaqub ibn Izaq al-Kindi, who lived 801-873 AD.
Al-Kindi. Okay.
However, the theory twists this. It claims that Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, supposedly leveraged al-Kindi's narrative to disseminate covert teachings, mirroring G's alleged operational role in Europe.
How are they linked?
Both are presented as foundational figures in cryptography. Al-Kindi pioneered frequency analysis for code breaking, while Alberti, operating as G, devised the first polyalphabetic cipher. It suggests a long-standing, interconnected practice of coded communication for their hidden agenda. Al-Kindi also played a significant role in introducing Indian numerals to the Arab world.
Which paved the way for Arabic numerals in Europe.
Exactly, and by extension, facilitating the adoption of double-entry bookkeeping in Florence and Venice.
So a cycle of loss and rediscovery.
That's how it's presented. A recurring cycle which the source claims betrays hidden manipulation, knowledge being deliberately suppressed, then rediscovered to serve the watch's agenda. The insight is how seemingly beneficial intellectual advances might have been part of a larger engineered plan. And what's suspicious, according to the source, Al-Kindi, celebrated as the first great Arab philosopher, a proto-humanist, reportedly produced hundreds of treatises integrating black ops management, occult ideas, rational inquiry, yet remarkably few survive.
A convenient gap.
The suspicious gap, critics contend, aligns with strategic knowledge control and the very existence of the Grand Library of Alexandria.
A contested point.
Fiercely contested. It's argued by many contemporary researchers to be an invented narrative, partly due to a scarcity of corroborating evidence. the argument goes. Because it wasn't genuinely destroyed in, say, 1258, there's no archaeological debris to find.
And the story of Mongols throwing books in the Tigris.
That narrative of the river running black with ink in 1258 is also presented as part of this fabricated history, a dramatic event designed to punctuate a historical reset. The insight is that even narratives of destruction can serve a purpose in obscuring genuine historical records.
Okay, beyond remixing knowledge, how does the watch's alleged influence extend to something as fundamental as finance, the origins of modern banking?
The source argues that the fuzziness, the ambiguity around the precise origins of double-entry bookkeeping.
Whether it was Hellenized Jewish communities or 15th century Venice.
Right. That ambiguity isn't accidental historical oversight. It stems supposedly from intentional cover-ups orchestrated by G's covert network. The earliest documented outline we have is Benedetto Cotrulli's 1458 manuscript Della Mercatura e del Mercante Perfetto. Yet, remarkably, this foundational text wasn't actually printed until 1573.
Over a century later.
Yeah. This unusually long delay, according to the theory, is consistent with the watch's tight control over when public knowledge gets disseminated. Then you have Paganini, a crucial Venetian printer.
What was his role?
He played a pivotal role by printing Luca Pacioli's seminal works, things like Summa de Arithmetica and De Divina Proportione.
Right. Pacioli codified double-entry bookkeeping.
Exactly. These treatises formally codified the principles. Pacioli's influential works, spread widely through Paganini's presses, effectively paved the way for the emergence of an international class of, well, the source calls them banksters.
Banksters.
A financial arm, essentially, of the broader intelligence apparatus. The complex relationship between Italian maritime republics like Venice and Genoa, where Alberti was supposedly born, and the Byzantine Empire. Their rivalries sometimes seem to undermine a unified Christian front. But within this theory, that complexity serves a deeper, hidden purpose of financial control. The insight is how a fundamental economic system was allegedly introduced to facilitate a new level of financial manipulation.
The theory makes an even more profound, maybe more sensitive claim, that organized religion itself was a sophisticated tool for population management. How does it argue this point?
Well, the source points again to Paganini, the printer, to his groundbreaking feat of publishing the first Arabic-language Quran in print.
That was significant, given the Ottoman ban on Arabic printing for Muslims.
Right, a ban from 1485 that lasted nearly 300 years. The theory then claims the Quran itself was compiled during the Renaissance.
Compiled then?
Yes, and that it contains concealed verses and intricate numerical ciphers, a kind of cryptographic watermark indicating the watch's underlier authorship.
So, blurring divine inspiration with social engineering?
That's how it's presented. Evidence that organized religion served as a sophisticated tool for population management. The insight is that even sacred texts can be viewed, through this specific lens, as a form of elaborate social programming. And this leads to an even more provocative claim, maybe the most provocative, that the Prophet Muhammad himself is posited as an agent, specifically identified with Mehmed the Conqueror, Sultan Mehmed II.
Wait, Muhammad was Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople in 1453.
Yeah.
The one who ended the Byzantine Empire. That's a monumental claim.
Wow.
And it was after his conquest, the crescent moon and star became linked with Islam.
It is indeed monumental. The source posits that while we don't have authentic contemporary depictions of Muhammad, reliable hadith collections, it claims, suggest he was, like Mehmed, a pale-skinned redhead. And the suggested primary reason Muhammad cannot be visually depicted is because the majority of Muslims today apparently do not physically resemble him, despite the claim that the first wave ruling elite did resemble him during the early Islamic conquests. This interpretation also touches upon sensitive areas, obviously, concerning historical representation and how physical traits get associated within certain narratives and social practices.
Like colorism.
Exactly. It argues some hadith collections contributed to certain attitudes by associating darker skin with negative traits. It mentions how racial hierarchies have influenced social practices, like marriage, often favoring lighter skin. It even cites a common Houthi prayer. Allah curse the Jews and their helpers. Allah make our complexion lighter than theirs.
Wow.
Again, it's absolutely crucial to reiterate we are presenting this strictly as it's conveyed in the source material, to illustrate the theory's interpretation of engineered outcomes, not as an endorsement.
Understood. So Mehmed himself, how is he depicted?
As a master linguist operating as a spy within the Watch, he actively gathered Italian humanists at his court, strategically allowed Byzantines to keep certain functions, all supposedly to further the watch's objective, centralizing the historical narrative in Florence.
And his library.
Beyond patronizing Renaissance artists, he built a formidable library over 8,000 manuscripts in every known language, a centralized collection point for humanist knowledge. His affinity for Italian culture wasn't widely supported in his Turkish court, especially since Venice controlled parts of the country before he was born.
And the comparison to Alexander the Great.
Right. Mehmed and Alexander are said to share a remarkably similar life story, especially considering their paternal lineages. This is presented as a recurring reflection, reinforcing the theory of patterned historical narratives. The insight is how central figures are seen as archetypal repetitions serving a larger agenda, even the strategic shift in prayer direction in early Islam.
From Jerusalem to the Kaaba in Mecca.
Yes. That's interpreted not just as religious evolution, but as a move to establish a distinct religious identity for Muslims, separating them from Jewish practices, while simultaneously reinforcing Islamic continuity with the broader Abrahamic lineage.
And Arab Spain.
Arab Spain served as a central repository, amassing a huge library that became pivotal for Latin translations back in Florence. Arab scholars, with their expertise in Eastern data manipulation methods, are argued to have contributed to a kind of distortion of knowledge, like a game of telephone where info gets altered in transmission. Greek and Arabic texts were remixed by humanists, advancing new ideas, but also, the theory claims, deliberately obscuring original sources and context. Finally, Islam itself, in this interpretation, is presented as the ultimate form of cancel culture.
How so?
So absolute in its narrative authority that it effectively cancels cancel culture itself. This aligns, the theory says, with the watch's objective. Establish a singular, unchallenged version of history and morality, eliminating dissent, safeguarding their own fabricated narratives.
And things like destroying statues.
The destruction of statues and monuments, often linked to the prohibition of idolatry in Islam, is presented as fitting within this framework of absolute narrative control. Even the degentrification stereotypes, sometimes associated with Muslims, is presented not as organic, but as a deliberately engineered outcome of census category manipulation. A tactical maneuver to redirect societal energy for the watch's broader agenda. The insight is how even powerful cultural phenomena are reframed as systematic operations of control.
Okay, with such sweeping claims, it's really crucial to understand how deeply embedded these alleged agents like G and families like the Alberti supposedly were in the actual fabric of history.
Yeah.
How does the source illustrate their power, their influence, even right down to the conflicts themselves?
The Alberti family's role is absolutely central here. The source details their violent, powerful involvement in medieval Florentine conflicts, things chronicled even in Dante's Inferno.
In the Inferno.
Yeah. They weren't just influencers. They were key players in the deep-seated political machinations shaping the Renaissance. It demonstrates the pervasive nature of the watch's alleged influence. The connection to Dante's Divine Comedy is quite specific. In Inferno, Canto Exidi, Dante places two Alberti members, Alessandro and Napoleone, in Cana.
The ninth circle of hell, for betraying kin.
Exactly. For murdering each other over family feuds. Dante describes them vividly. If thou wouldst know who are these two, the valley whence the Vicenzio descends belonged to their father Albert and to them. They issued from one body, and so on, saying no shade was more worthy of being frozen in ice.
Intense. But there's another Alberti connection.
Yes, in Paradiso, Cantonais, Cunizia da Romano, daughter of Adelaide degli Alberti, appears in the sphere of Venus. She's shown as a soul who found grace despite a, let's say, lively romantic life. It shows Dante's complex moral view.
So what were their politics?
Complex. They were exiled after the Battle of Monteperdi in 1260, returned, exiled again in 1382. Staunch Black Guelphs, supporting the papacy, challenging the rival Albizzi faction, their return to Florence in 1428, regaining full rights in 1434, is suggested by the source to be a planned maneuver by the watch, timed precisely to coincide with the emergence of both the Aztec and Incan empires, underscoring their supposed global reach. The insight is how specific family lines are presented as foundational to the watch's operational success, and their extensive banking and textile networks gave them transnational reach.
Crucial for the watch.
Absolutely. The source highlights that for 5 generations, English and French monarchs fought protracted wars over European dominance. This led to expanded armies, bigger state budgets,
Funding what?
funding the growth of foreign ministries, and eventually dedicated intelligence services. By the 16th century, espionage becomes professionalized. Military attachés, salaried operatives, globally contracted spies under central command. Another enduring legacy, the source claims, of the watch's long-range strategic planning.
And the Alberti family's connections, according to the source, even touch upon the very origins of words we use today, like assassin. How does that work?
Yes, the source claims that in Canto 19 of Dante's Inferno, Dante refers to a traitor as an assassin. The term was further defined by an early commentator, Francesco da Putti, as one who kills for money, linked to treachery at Monteperti.
Okay, but the word's origins.
The modern English word assassination comes from the Hashashins, a sect of Nizari Ismailis led by Hassani Saba, the old man of the mountain.
Famous for targeted killings.
Exactly. Ideologically driven killings. Marco Polo's account, published interestingly concurrently with Dante's Divine Comedy, depicted Saba creating this elite cadre through systematic indoctrination. It played a pivotal role in introducing assassin into European languages.
And the parallel.
The parallels drawn are striking. The old men's network trained operatives in language, etiquette, warfare, establishing a model for sophisticated covert agents that supposedly reappeared in the Watch's operations, similar maybe to Alberti's Florentine Academy. These early assassins were also associated with extensive libraries and curated knowledge.
Reinforcing that theme of knowledge control.
Exactly. The insight is how these seemingly disparate threads, literature, politics, secret societies, all converge in the Watch's narrative.
Okay, beyond these covert agents and families, how did the Watch allegedly use broader economic and political levers to achieve its sweeping goals, manipulating dynasties and markets?
Right. The Watch's manipulation allegedly extended deep into economic and political structures. Example, through Pope Nicholas V, the powerful Medici family acquired the lucrative alum deposits at Tolfa in 1461.
Alum, the dye fixer.
Exactly. This broke Constantinople's prior monopoly. Then, Alberti's second patron, Pope Pius II, granted the Medici an outright monopoly, a stark illustration, the source argues, of systematic market rigging.
And manipulating dynasties.
Nicholas V and Pius II also actively fostered the Habsburg banking house, the Casa d'Austria. Their strategic alliance with the Medici, starting with Lorenzo de' Medici, supported what the source calls a deliberately elongated historical timeline, favoring their dynastic ambitions.
And the Church's role.
Later, Pope Leo X, a Medici himself, oversaw both the early Reformation debates and the Vatican archives. This gave the Church a compelling motive, the theory suggests, to extend ecclesiastical history and reinforce its perceived supremacy. The Watch is also credited with orchestrating Frederick III's elevation to Holy Roman Emperor, 1452-1493.
Frederick III, his motto, AEIOU.
That's the one. His famous motto and interest in cult manuals link him, in this theory, to the Voynich manuscript as a secret Habsburg handbook. He was a lavish patron of art and architecture, amassed a huge library.
The foundation of Austria's national library today.
Exactly. The Habsburgs then kept the imperial title until the early 1800s, produced monarchs for Bohemia, Croatia, Hungary, Spain. Concurrently, Pius II declared a crusade in 1460, Roman influence in the Holy Land grew, and G supposedly directed newly arrived Greek experts into humanist circles in Florence and Venice,
where large-scale textual fabrication began.
Systematically reshaping global theology, the source claims. Many manuscripts presented as ancient were, in reality, first-time creations. The insight is how the Watch allegedly manipulated alliances, elevated key figures to strategically reshape both political landscapes and foundational historical documents.
And the sheer scale of the Habsburg Empire across Europe, the new world that would surely require a meticulously manufactured history to justify it, right?
Absolutely. The Habsburgs rose to dominance through strategic marriages, military conquests, eventually ruling the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, Austria, much of the New World. To justify this vast empire, they needed a grand historical narrative.
Positioning themselves as heirs to Rome.
Exactly, heirs to ancient Rome and Christendom. This, the source claims, required erasing or altering competing histories, controlling scholarship, promoting a Latin-centric Roman-derived chronology, effectively laying the foundation for modern historical misconceptions.
And the Romanovs fit into this.
The Romanov dynasty's rise in Russia is presented as part of this broader European historical falsification linked to the Habsburgs, the Vatican, Renaissance scholars, and the Habsburgs prominently use the double-headed eagle emblem,
symbolizing church-state, east-west authority.
Right. Inherited from Byzantium, who got it from the Hittites.
Yeah.
After Byzantium fell, the Russian Empire adopted it, the Third Rome idea, emphasizing imperial and Orthodox Christian authority. You also see it in Seljuk Turks, Freemasonry, Albanian, Serbian, Armenian heraldry.
So powerful symbols and manufactured histories legitimize empire.
That's the insight, how they're used to consolidate power. This brings us to the fascinating concept of the perpetuation of the Roman state. Conventionally, the Western Empire falls in 476 AD. The Eastern Byzantine lasts till 1453. But the theory argues the Roman Empire's legal structures were actually perpetuated through Byzantium, the Holy Roman Empire, and eventually Khazaria.
Khazaria again.
Yeah. Julius Caesar's personal cipher, his title Caesar, they left a profound linguistic legacy. Khazar, Kaiser, Tsar, the Pahlavi Khazar. Another thread connecting Rome's advanced intelligence methods to later steppe empires. A continuous hidden chain of command, perhaps. The insight is how legal and linguistic threads might betray an underlying system of control across millennia.
So this definitely isn't just a European story then, is it? This deep dive suggests a truly global network of control exerted by the Watch. How far did their influence actually extend, according to this theory?
The reach depicted is truly global, yeah. The Renaissance saw espionage formalized in France and England. The Alberti family's banking and textile networks gave them transnational reach. Those protracted Anglo-French wars led to bigger armies, bigger budgets.
Funding intelligence services.
Exactly. By the 16th century, espionage is professionalized military attachés, salaried operatives, global spies under central command, an enduring legacy, the source claims, of the Watch's strategic planning. Elsewhere, humanist agents allegedly infiltrated the Lodi dynasty in Afghanistan
Using its resources.
to finance the Forbidden City in Beijing while subtly directing Ming exploration. In Africa, Islam was supposedly weaponized to dismantle Nubian kingdoms, leaving only Alodia as a client state.
What about Spain and Mali?
The Vatican-led Reconquista dismantled Arab Spain. Mali's influence waned under pressure from Songhai-controlled proxies, even the 100 Years' War.
Ending chivalry, strengthening England and France.
Is attributed to the Watch's pervasive influence, leading both nations toward global power, and a series of disasters in the Yucatan just before Spanish contact in 1511.
Creating a power vacuum.
Yeah, facilitating colonial entry. It's presented as suggesting premeditated orchestration. Infiltration reached courts in Egypt, India, China. Figures like Al-Adil Kitbuga, a Mongol-origin sultan of Egypt, exemplify this shadow empire. The Golden Horde settled in Russia by 1279.
And China's Yuan conquest.
Believed by some mentioned in the source to be fabricated, maybe to match later European colonial propaganda. A theory by Fomenko is cited, claiming German historians invented the Mongol myth to erase Russia's real imperial legacy. The insight is the sheer breadth of the Watch's alleged involvement in global transformations. And what's really fascinating is the claim that translators routinely mapped one set of people, places, events onto many different names, deliberately misdating them by centuries.
Like Marco Polo.
Marco Polo is presented as a reflection of Vitruvius Polio. Both have similar names, described as military engineers, got warm receptions from powerful courts. It indicates a deliberate pattern of recycling historical identities.
And after Constantinople fell,
various competing claims to the Byzantine legacy emerged. Wallachian nobles, double agents, Mehmet II styling himself Kaiser Rum Caesar, or Khazar, of Rome. These rival factions, through continuous infiltration and counter-infiltration, inadvertently ensured every new successor ultimately advanced the hidden architect's overarching plan for cultural and chronological engineering. The insight is how even apparent rivalries are viewed as part of a larger, controlled system managing narratives.
Okay, let's bring this closer to the present. The theory argues that the fall of Constantinople functions as a kind of foundational blueprint, an allegory, for something we might even see happening today. How does it draw that explicit modern parallel?
Right. The source explicitly states that the historical reset following Constantinople's fall serves as a blueprint for modern demographic engineering.
Demographic engineering? How?
Where populations are strategically reshaped to generate new forms of social cohesion and centralized control. The explicit modern parallel drawn is with China's contemporary demographic policy.
Specifically regarding the Uyghurs?
Yes. Actively promoting Han Chinese births while simultaneously suppressing Uyghur population growth through coercive methods, forced sterilizations, restrictive birth regulations. The source notes that many regions now predominantly Han were originally home to ethnically distinct groups, established through centuries of systematic expansion, assimilation, displacement. The mole's perception, referenced in the source.
Who's a mole?
It seems to be a term used within the source material itself, perhaps referring to an insider or a specific perspective. This mall viewed Constantinople's collapse as evidence society had reached a critical breaking point, needing deliberate reset measures.
Reframing upheaval as justification.
Exactly. Reframing the ethnic and cultural upheaval as justification for erasing public memory and imposing a controlled cultural trajectory. The source then observes the same pattern, it claims, in contemporary urban centers.
How?
When a dominant voting bloc departs amidst claims of cultural decay, new narratives and interest groups emerge to fill the void. It echoes historical virtue signaling, the source says, but on a civilizational scale. The insight is that these historical patterns, however disparate they seem, are interpreted as recurring mechanisms of control that transcend time.
This concept of narrative recapture offers a fascinating psychological lens to view these claims, doesn't it? What exactly is it, and how does it play out in the source's theory?
It is fascinating, yeah. Narrative recapture is defined as this psychological process where a conquered people, when they regain power, tend to reframe external conflicts as internal ones.
Oh.
The source contends that even the author of Encrypted Reality, TNC, while provocative, might fall prey to this dynamic. It cites the redating of the Mongol Empire as a Russian horde, as an example.
So it's not just a Russian thing.
No, the source emphasizes this is a universal human condition. It reflects a deep-seated need to assert indigenous authority by rewriting the past. It mirrors how other cultures, in their own bids for historical supremacy, have denied the influence of their conquerors. It creates this cyclical pattern of historical fabrication. The insight is that the human impulse to control and rewrite history is a fundamental, recurring psychological phenomenon. And this historical revisionism, it's argued, extends even to the physical description of Genghis Khan, while no definitive remains exist.
Right.
Secondhand descriptions and genetic evidence offer that nuanced counter-narrative. It acknowledges the ethnic diversity, the blending within the Mongol Empire, East Asian, Central Asian features, maybe ruddy complexions among the elite, challenging those simplified historical portrayals.
Okay, beyond the tangible history, the sources hint at deeper, maybe even spiritual or esoteric patterns at play in this grand design. What are these understandings that lend depth to the claims?
Right. The source reveals that Dante's Divine Comedy has been interpreted through esoteric traditions. Later Rosicrucian groups, various occult circles, especially from the 18th century onwards, perceived within the poem an allegorical structure for spiritual initiation. The 9 circles of hell, for instance, were adopted as symbolic stages in groups like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Even architecturally.
Yeah, like in the initiation wells at Quinta da Regaleira in Portugal. This interpretation suggests the poem might encode secret knowledge passed between mystical societies, structuring their rituals and hierarchies. The insight is that even great literature could be seen as vehicles for hidden knowledge and control. Then there's the Rosicrucian legend, claiming the Order of the Rose Cross was founded in 1313 with 12 exalted beings.
12. That number comes up a lot.
It does, and it reflects a broader mythological pattern of divine councils found across world mythology. The 12 Hittite gods in cuneiform texts, the Roman Deconcentus, the 12 principal Egyptian gods, the Greek Olympians, the Celtic Tuatha De Danann.
Why this recurring pattern?
It suggests a universal psychological architecture, possibly rooted in the theory of the bicameral mind, where divine councils symbolized inner commands or externalized voices of divine authority, influencing social roles. The insight is these recurring myths aren't coincidence, but reflect deep, possibly innate human cognitive patterns that can be leveraged for social organization. G's role, back in the Renaissance, supposedly included crafting narratives reflecting an evolving consciousness.
Like myths of younger gods overcoming older ones.
Exactly. In numerous myths, 12 younger gods overcome an older generation of chaotic deities, Hindu devas versus asuras, Greek Olympians versus titans, Celtic bright gods versus darker predecessors.
What do these symbolize?
They're interpreted as symbolic representations of the human shift from, say, bicameral obedience to introspective reasoning. The new gods embody structured, conscious awareness. The insight is how myths themselves are viewed as powerful tools for shaping societal consciousness, guiding humanity through developmental stages.
And that linguistic legacy you outlined is truly profound. Alberti's revised Latin alphabet leading to runes, Gothic, Cyrillic, Aramaic radiating into Hebrew, Syriac, Arabic, Mongolian. It's a testament to the power of language in shaping history, isn't it?
Absolutely. These intricate linguistic lineages, routed perhaps through Khazar migrations into Mongolia and Siberia, They seem to coalesce in the curious odyssey of Marco Polo, an emblematic thread weaving together espionage, alphabet creation, cultural transfer across Eurasia. It's presented as a deliberate effort to create interconnectedness and control through communication.
And ultimately,
Ultimately, the source ties this all back to that Jungian shadow of archaic admixtures, the ultimate goal being to reconcile with our inherent nature. The raw power, the aggression may be associated with Neanderthals, inherited through archaic DNA.
Manifesting how?
Potentially manifesting as serial violence, political brutality, what the source calls the unyielding claim against removal. A deep-seated drive for survival and dominance embedded within human consciousness. The insight is that these ancient drives continue to influence our world, shaping individual and collective behavior in profound, often unseen ways.
Wow. What we've explored today in this deep dive into encrypted reality, it presents a truly radical reinterpretation of history. It paints this picture of a persistent, hidden force, the watch meticulously shaping civilizations, beliefs, even our collective memory.
Yeah.
Driven by this deeply ingrained legacy reflex tied to ancient human origins.
It truly challenges us, doesn't it? To look beyond the accepted narratives, consider the deeper currents flowing beneath the surface of history. It highlights a scale of alleged manipulation. I mean, from grand designs of empires and religions down to subtle influence on finance and language itself. It suggests a deliberate, continuous shaping of our world.
So knowing all this, the question for you, the listener, is, how might you begin to look for the hidden patterns, the subtle remixes in the historical narratives that shape our world today? What untold stories or perhaps deliberately obscured truths might be waiting for you to uncover?
And if this deep dive has definitely sparked your curiosity, if you want to explore more, you can download the entire audiobook and retrieve supplemental material on michaelanthonyalberta.com. We really encourage you to dive deeper into these fascinating, though challenging, ideas.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep getting well informed.